Welcome everyone to another of my min-max character creation guides to Pillars of Eternity. My name is Macsen. In this video we're going to be taking a look at the Cipher class, and specifically we're going to be taking a look at a Cipher build that is a very conventional Cipher build, one focusing on DPS and range. Now before I get into tons of details, let's have a look at the Cipher's basics. So you can see a bit of their backstory here. They start in ability. They have powers. Ciphers can directly target allies and enemies with powerful soul focus effects. These powers cost focus, which Ciphers build through the use of their soul whip. And I'm going to be going into details how all of this works a bit later on. Ciphers are very unique to Pillars of Eternity. They're kind of weird. They're a mixture of, well, first of all, they're in the same basic group as the Rogue and the Ranger. They're damage dealing class, basically. And they specifically usually target only one opponent, although they have some spells which can inflict afflictions and damage to more than one opponent. They're also kind of a caster as well, so they have similarities to other classes like the wizard and the chanter and the druid and the priest as well. I'd say they're most similar to the chanters in terms of how their casting works, but they are still a lot different from the chanters. So their skills, they start with a point in stealth, lore and mechanics, and their basic stats, they have the worst endurance in the game alongside the wizard. Health is a bit better than the wizard, but still is pretty terrible. They have average accuracy, the most is 30. All of their spells, though, I believe have a small accuracy bonus, so in effect it's really 30 or more, I believe. Deflection is high, the most in the game is 25, so they don't have the highest deflection either. So with those stats, it's pretty hard to make them a good melee build or a frontline build, but it's maybe possible, but we're not going to be showing that off in this video anyway. Now, if you've watched any of my previous character creation videos, like the second paladin video I did, and also my fighter, the sweeper fighter I did, you'll be quite familiar with these attributes. These are my DPS attributes. I tend to use very similar to this for all of my damage per second class builds, simply because might and dexterity is all about DPS, much damage as possible in a quick enough time. And intellect, you need that with the Cipher to prolong the duration of their abilities and also their area of effect as well. So those three are the maximized stats, and the rest don't really matter all of that much. Perception, interrupt is a small booster. I've put on 11. To be honest, the Cipher doesn't really benefit too much from causing interrupts, especially a ranged Cipher. I'm planning on using this Cipher to use gunpowder weapons, and they're pretty terrible for causing interrupts frequently, so you don't really need perception all that much. Now our starting health and endurance is really bad. It's one of the worst character classes in the game for health and endurance, so you're not going to get much more by raising your constitution by much. If you really don't care about your interrupts, I guess you could just stick a ton of constitution on here instead, but you're still not going to get much out of it. So I prefer to have about an average amount of interrupt, to be honest. So in terms of race, I've gone for a wood elf. The reason I've gone for the wood elf is because, well, it gives a bonus to dexterity first of all, which is one of the maximized stats, but more importantly it gives a distant advantage. So when you're 4 meters away from an enemy, you gain an accuracy boost. That's a key reason why I've gone for this, but you also get some extra defenses as well, which could be nice. So if you get shot at, you have extra deflection, and if a wizard type character uses a spell, then reflex can come in handy. Now if you weren't going to go for a wood elf, for a ranged DPS Cipher class, then you probably still want to go for a character that maximizes in one of the 3 key stats. But there aren't very many good options, sadly. To be honest, I think Obsidian could do with a change in some of these races again, giving them slightly different attributes maybe at some point, maybe when the expansion comes out, whenever that is. So godlike, If you're going to go godlike, I mean, the extra dexterity and intellect is great, but none of these really help the Cipher out very much. You shouldn't be getting targeted with the Cipher very often. If you are, then your Cipher's going to get killed pretty quickly. Death Godlike is probably the best pick there. All the other ones are pretty defensive. Orlan is one you may want to consider, but his stats are pretty bad really. It's not in any of the areas that you really want them in. In fact, it's completely the opposite. It's very much very defensive build the Orlan is for normally. Half Orlan, yeah, it converts some extra hits into crits. So that would be half decent for the Cipher. Dwarf, yeah, bad stats. None of those are really good. Amawa, Might's good. Yeah, this is probably a decent option to be honest. I really like the Island Amawa. It works for DPS characters very well. And human, don't like their ability. You're not going to be targeted much, so you shouldn't be falling below 50% endurance. So I think the Wood Elf is the way to go for a DPS ranged Cipher, certainly, which is what I'm doing here. Right, and for culture, I've gone for Old Veiler. So extra intellect, more duration, bigger area of effect. Definitely the way to go, I think, for a Cipher. And the skill set, it was stealth, lore, and mechanics. Now, because we've got really high intelligence and might, the lore, mechanics, and survival skills become much more worthwhile taking, since they all have duration and damage, or nearly all of them, I think, if not all of them. So, lore is mainly focusing on spells that wizards and druids normally have. If you don't have a wizard in your party or a druid, you may want to take lore, but the thing is, you're always going to be using your focus to use your spells here anyway. So I'm not sure how much use lore is going to be, to be honest, for a Cipher. You could have them as a stealthy character, so you may want to go for a stealthy background. Here I've gone for athletics and mechanics, so this would be focusing on disarming traps and also unlocking locks, focusing on mechanics. But you could go for a stealthy character, go half stealth, half mechanics, and try and find traps, maybe. There's a few ways you could go. You can even go colonist, even though you don't have any survival, and bump that up a ton. So I haven't mentioned the spells I've taken either, have I? I think I'm going to mention these later on, but for my first level picks, I really like Whisper of Treason. Well, I mention it a bit now. This basically, you gain control over the enemy. There is actually a dominated power at level 3, but it costs twice as much in focus, so I preferred that one. Soul Shock is a very good damaging spell, so that's the other one I usually take, and I'll mention the other 4 a bit later on. Right, let's level up our Cipher to level 12, and I'll show you a ton of the abilities and go into more detail about Soul Shock and how the Cipher works. Okay, skills first of all, I'm going to level those up at level 12, which is what I usually do in these character creation videos. So we get to pick another power here. So with the powers, at the odd levels you get to pick 2 new powers, and at the even levels you get to pick 1 power. And we've already picked 2 at level 1, so we've got 1 more level 1 power, and then next time round it will be level 2, then at level 5 it'll be level 3, and so on. So we've got 4 left to pick basically here. So there's about, well, I think there's over 30 odd powers that the Cipher can pick from. For the early levels you get a choice from between, well, you pick 3 from 6, I believe it is, and then at level 4 is, I think it's 5 picks you get. So you can pick 3 out of 5, then it's 3 out of 4, and the last level is only 3 powers that you have to pick all of them. So it's the early levels which are the big choices here, to be honest. Now the Cipher really focuses on causing afflictions. They have more afflictions than any other class in terms of being able to cause them in the first place. Not sure how many, I think there's 17 afflictions in the game if my memory is correct. I'm not sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Cipher is capable of causing all of them actually, or very nearly all of them. So this one here, this is literally just afflictions. Now one thing I should point out about the Cipher is they can't just cast their spells on, say, part of the scenery. It has to be on an opponent or an ally. So it has to be something that has a soul in effect. So that kind of limits their spell casting a tiny bit, but it doesn't make much of a difference really. They do have some interrupt things, but not many, like I mentioned, so perception isn't so important. This causes frightened, confused. Uh, Most of these are pretty good, these spells actually. I've looked through all of them. I haven't actually tested all of them because it's like 30 odd, but I know some of them pretty well. For this pick here, it's actually a pretty tough pick. Tenuous Grasp, I wouldn't really recommend, probably. I think some of these are better. Mind Wave, it's quite difficult to actually get this one to work in the first place. The actual target you use it on, it causes raw damage, and raw damage is, I think it's the best damage in the game actually, since it doesn't take DR into account. There's no minuses for DR, it's just straightforward damage. Anyone behind anyone behind the target is affected by a cone, so they go prone if you hit them, but it's quite hard to actually hit them. Ice Strike causes blinded and dazed to the actual target, and blinded is very good actually. It's got a good range. It's even got a good radius on this spell, so it's pretty good. And blinded, all the other foes in the area of effect are blinded. It's just a target that is dazed. So that's a very good spell. One thing I should point out with the Cipher as well, because they cause so many afflictions, it works very well if you have a rogue in your party, since the rogue's sneak ability is actually modified by a large number of afflictions. Any of the petrified, paralyzed group, which there are 5 different afflictions in that group. I think it's flanked, hobbled and weakened as well, which the Cipher is also very capable of causing. Many of their abilities do that, their powers. So rogues and Ciphers together work very well in my opinion, although they're very well, they're both a damage dealing class and they're very weak to attacks, so having one of each could be you could have quite a fragile party potentially. Right, so the antipathetic field, easy for me to say. This causes corrode damage, and it's a beam style weapon. It's over a duration amount. You have to move your Cipher into the right position to get the best out of this power, so it can be quite tricky, but it could potentially cause a lot of damage. I've got a list of powers that I would usually take, and I'm going to follow that here in this example. I wrote this down when the beta was out, the last version of beta, so I don't know if some of the recent patches have changed it, but I'm going to go for Eye Strike. I think this is very good, and it would work very well with a rogue as well, since it blinds opponents. Right, talents. So the Cipher has about 5 different talents that are specific to the Cipher and the Cipher alone. One of them comes off Psychic Backlash as a secondary talent. You have to pick this one first. I don't actually like Psychic Backlash all that much. It only works if your Cipher is targeted by a will attack, and in theory that probably doesn't happen very often. If they do target you, then you basically stun them for a small amount of time, affected by your intelligence, and the add-on one causes 20 raw damage as well, I think. I don't really like that, as I mentioned though. Biting Whip uses your Soul Whip, and in fact it makes it cause more damage. Now Soul Whip is a constant effect. What it does is basically make all of your weapons cause more damage as long as your Cipher hasn't reached its cap on its focus amount. Now your Cipher starts with 15 focus on level 1, and every level it goes up it increases by 5, and you can never have more than double that amount. If you get double that amount hitting your cap, then your Soul Whip turns off, so you're no longer causing the extra damage. So it's a very good idea to make use of your powers, and all of your powers cost focus. So if you're not using those powers often enough, you lose your Soul Whip. So yeah, don't do that basically. So that's a very good pick, and I'll be picking that later on. Now this one actually gives you extra focus on hits with your Soul Whip. You gain focus by using conventional attacks, and it's any weapon basically that's a conventional weapon. So swords, guns, bows, whatever. As long as it's a conventional weapon, then you gain focus whenever you cause a type of hit. So that's a graze, a hit, or a crit. Crits being the best. It's actually quite hard to figure out how exactly the amount of focus is generated. There isn't very good documentation. Sadly, Obsidian hasn't given much information on it. I'm pretty sure it's linked to damage in some way, but I find that if you do crits, you get a heck of a lot more. Uh, yeah, it's kind of weird how it works, but if you do a lot of damage and crits, then you get tons of focus, and the opposite if you do the opposite of that. So, and I'll be discussing weapons a bit later on, which are the best ones to use. You may know what that weapon type is. I'll talk about that later on. So this one, greater focus, this adds to your cap. Sadly, it doesn't. You don't get this straight away. So on a level 1 Cipher, you get 15 straight away to use your powers straight away, which is amazing. But this doesn't add to that amount. It just adds to the maximum focus you can have. So a level 1 Cipher could have 40 focus instead of 30 in effect, which it might sound quite good, but you should never really be getting that much focus anyway. You should be spending your focus almost as soon as you get it on your powers to stop yourself from losing your Soul Whip capability. So I think this is a really bad pick. So the pick I'm going to be picking here is focus on hit. And let's go to level 3. Now this skills and abilities could take me quite a long actually, because there's so many abilities. So let's move on again. Now we've got more powers here. So what have I got written down here? Mental binding. So what does that do? That paralyzes and makes opponents stuck as well. So that's great for the rogue as well. I've picked a lot of these for the rogue in mind actually. Now because we're a wood elf as well, if we're over 4 meters away from an opponent we get an accuracy bonus. So that's something you should keep in mind with a lot of these spells as well. I'm probably going to be picking ones that best at range. So let's pick Mental Binding, and the other one I've decided to pick is Mind Blades. So this is a slash damage in effect, and it jumps to targets as well. Very nice. I'll mention the others in a minute. Okay, so the other ones, my last pick is going to be Recall Agony. Now this I believe is very good at boss type characters, or very high endurance characters. So this basically inflicts extra damage. It's quite weird how it works, and I can't exactly remember how it works actually, but I think that's quite a decent pick. The other picks here, that drains resolve and you get extra deflection. So this might be good for a melee type Cipher, the extra deflection. If you drain an opponent's resolve, then they're easier to will attack, and also easier to attack them conventionally as well, because it gives you extra deflection. Resolve does. Phantom Foes is kind of a weird one. I think Phantom Foes is the only spell in the game that makes opponents flanked. Normally you would flank someone by sticking opponents in melee against them on the side or around the back of them, 2 or more opponents. So it seems quite good because it's the only way to flank them via a spell in the game, but it's pretty easy to flank people anyway, isn't it? This would be quite good if you had a rogue in a party, of course, because rogues benefit from flanking for their sneak attacks, but I'm not so sure it's such a good pick. This one, that's a healthy amount of damage actually. Maybe you should consider that. And it's a jump target as well. Even a 3-meter push. Yeah, that does look pretty good, doesn't it? So maybe you should consider that actually instead of some of the ones I picked. But I'm going to go for Recall Agony. The talent pick. So we picked... What am I going to pick next? Biting Whip, I think. Extra soul damage. Yeah, let's go for that. And next picks, so level 3 powers. Now, what have I gone for? Fractured Volition and Secret Horrors I've got written down here. So, Fractured Volition, that hobbles and weakens, so it's Afflictions, great for a rogue in your party again. Secret Horrors, Frightened and Sickened. Now, if you have other companions in your party that do these type of afflictions, these spells might not be so good. I'll discuss the others in a second. So the other 4, the last one I've gone for is Soul Ignition. So that one causes massive amounts of burn damage actually, so that seems pretty amazing to be honest. It's only on one target though. You get all of these spells seem to give 5 accuracy at least, and that's versus Fortitude. So you've got Puppet Master. I think I might mention this earlier on. The reason why I don't take this is because it costs 20 focus, and the one at level 1, which is Charmed, if I'm remembering correctly, that is the same family group as Dominated. Now, Dominated is better, but for twice as much focus, I don't think it's worthwhile, personally. Pain Link could be quite a good ability. You use this on an ally, and 25% of all damage is reapplied to nearby enemies over that duration, and it's actually even more accuracy than normal on that. It's 10 instead of 5, 8 meter range. So if you've got, say, a frontline companion who's getting absolutely battered, but is maybe good at healing, say it's a fighter with constant recovery, this could be pretty good. That's definitely worth considering highly. And Ecto Psychic Echo. Crush damage to anyone caught in between. So it's a beam. This is quite similar to one of the level 1 beams. That's pretty good as well. It's actually really difficult to choose the Cipher's picks, to be frank. I wouldn't necessarily pick the ones I've picked. Certainly you should try them out for yourself, that's what I'm trying to say. But I've got written down Soul Ignition, so I'm going to keep that. Now, talents, I'm going to start picking the basic talents now. I don't want either of those. So the first basic talent I'm going to pick is Ruffian. Now, this gives you accuracy bonus. Accuracy is so important with the Cipher. If you're going to get that focus, you need to be hitting. So, yeah, definitely want a weapon focus. And the key weapons I'm going to be using with my Cipher, DPS range Cipher, is pistols and blunderbusses. So later on, I'm actually going to be taking Arms Bearer, give me an extra weapon set. So what I'd probably have is a pistol and 2 blunderbusses. Now blunderbusses are like a very primitive shotgun. They do multiple hits, in fact up to 8. Now the key thing to remember with the Cipher is every hit you make you get extra focus, so this blunderbuss can give you huge amounts of focus. And it's probably the best weapon in the game for the Cipher, in fact. The pistol is nice, but main reason why I'm picking Ruffian is because of blunderbuss. Pistol means you can fire at a half decent rate and also do a lot of damage, which gives you more focus as well. So that's the weapon that you'd be using in the main, and the blunderbuss is what you'd fire off at various points in combat as well, but probably wouldn't reload during combat to use. You just switch over to your pistol after firing the blunderbuss. Right, so let's pick that. Level 7. So we have, as you can see, only 5 picks to choose from this time. So I've got written down Mind Lance and Pain Block. So Mind Lance, that is a... Is that a beam attack? I can't see here. That description there suggests it's a beam attack, but it doesn't actually say foe and beam with it, so I'm not actually sure, but that does a lot of pierce damage. Pain Block, allied targets, plus 10 damage reduction and endurance. That seems really good to me. Keep someone alive. So let's pick those and I'll show you the others in a second. So my last pick here is Silent Scream. I've got written down. So this one does raw damage, the best type of damage, and it's a faux area of effect. Area of effect 3.7 radius with the intelligence. Yeah, this seems really good spell actually. 25 focus, average speed. The other two, body attunement. This gives extra damage reduction to the Cipher, I believe. And that's it. So this might be pretty good for a melee type Cipher. For a ranged DPS Cipher, probably not. Unless you've got yourself in trouble somehow. And the other one, this one, Wild Leech. This nicks 10 points stolen from a random attribute. So, say for example, 10 extra perception, 10 extra constitution. This doesn't seem very good to me, to be honest. So I think, yeah, I would leave that in most circumstances. Next talent, Arms Bearer. This gets an extra blunderbuss to use, basically. So where is that? Utility. Next level. Now at this stage it becomes more of a question about which one you're not going to pick rather than which ones you are going to pick. So, because you get 3 out of 4 here. So I've got written down Borrowed Instinct. This one, what does this do? Extra stats for your Cipher, I think. Yeah. So, yeah, it's okay. And probably better for a melee type Cipher. And I've got Detonate as well. That one does massive amounts of raw damage. That seems bugged to me. Causes low endurance opponents to explode. I don't think I've actually tried this one out. It sounds really good though. So let's pick those two. Level 10. So the last pick here I've gone written down is Ringleader. So Dominated and Charmed. That's amazing, this one sounds. So Dominated and Charmed are the same affliction group, and you gain control of your enemies in those situations. You can see here that Charmed is slightly worse because it lowers the speed accuracy in all defenses. So when you're in control of them, you actually want better stats since you're attacking someone else in effect. Usually want better stats, I'd imagine. Tactical Meld. 20 accuracy to the Cipher when attacking the same enemy as the target, your friendly opponent who cast it on. Which, don't like that over the others. So the next talent I'm going to pick is Gunner, I think. Got written down here. So this is extra reload speed. So we're going to be using pistols and blunderbusses. So it's great for that. If you've got a chanter in your party as well, they have a chant which increases your reload speed as well. Could be very good to have in conjunction with the Cipher. Level 11. And basically, I'm not going to go into details on these, simply because we're going to get them all. So, let's go across here. And our last talent pick. So it's quite more difficult. You could go two-handed style, get extra damage infliction. Since we're using pistols and blunderbusses, they're all two-handed weapons, so could pick them. Another pick you might want to go for is Marksman. Increase your chance of hitting and getting focus in the first place, and also increasing your chance of getting hits and crits as well. I'm sure there's other picks here that you could consider as well. If there's something particularly good, then I'll mention it in annotations, but I don't think there is really. Right, so we're going to pick... let's go Marksman. Okay, and I've actually forgotten skills, haven't I? So I'll show that off, and then I'll do the combat example. So, I think I kind of mentioned earlier on what my plan was basically for the skills. So for this guy, who was this Cipher, which was a labourer, you could invest mainly in mechanics, and do you need stealth? Kind of depends on where you're going to be positioning the Cipher within your party when they're moving around the map, whether or not you need stealth, or if you're going to look for traps with the Cipher, you could go stealth and mechanics. This one is just going to be opening locks basically and disarming traps. So let's put 5 into athletics, and we've got a point left. We can stick that anywhere now basically. Level 1 scrolls with that. Maybe use some potions. Let's go with that, is it? Right, combat example. Okay, in this combat example I'm just going to show off how exactly the Cipher works rather than show off literally all the abilities, since it would take at least a couple of hours to do that, I think. So I've leveled up my Cipher to level 4 in this example, and this is exactly the same order of things I picked earlier on, except for I've given the Cipher Ruffian a tiny bit earlier. And I've also given the Ruffian, if I show this, I've given them a pistol and a blunderbuss. And she's not going to wear any armor, since that lowers her recovery speed no matter what armor you give her. So she'd be attacking less quickly if I were to give her armor. Does mean she's going to be very fragile though, so you've really got to be careful with your Cipher. That fighter class I did in a previous character creation video, you may want to have that in your party to help protect her and rogues as well.
I'm here.
So let's get this combat started against this forest troll.
Yes.
So I'm going to take... well, this guy does next to no damage anyway, so but yeah, I'll take his weapons off so he's not doing tons. So I can show the Cipher off a bit more. Let's get him involved here.
Bring them down!
Now, remember, this Cipher is a wood elf, so we want to be 4 meters away to benefit from that. So you can see here we start with 30 focus, that's where your focus is shown. Now the soul whip is in effect here, but if you got to 60 focus, which is twice as much as your cap, then the soul whip would turn off, so you wouldn't be getting the extra damage bonus from that. You can see here we get in, that's what we're getting from it. +2 focus from one of the talents. I think if I... no, that's the wrong one. Soul whip. That's where it mentions a bit about it, but doesn't really mention hardly anything at all. Obsidian needs to add more than that. Focus below maximum. That's only when it works, as I mentioned. So the cap at level 4 would be 60 points. 15 plus 5 per each level from the start.
Yes.
Right, so get them involved. Let's use...
I'm here.
Well, you need to use your powers basically. If you hit your cap, then you're wasting your power. So I think in this situation, mind bending would be pretty good to paralyze the target so he can't attack. And you have to, you can't cast it on the terrain anywhere. It has to be on a soul. And on this circumstance, it has to be on a enemy rather than your own guy. So that's successfully cast. Looks like it's a normal hit rather than a crit, so it's 8 odd seconds. Now you can see that that's going to be very powerful. Paralyzing attacks. The paralyzing affliction group is probably my favorite, since, well, they can't attack and it's very easy to do damage against them then. So what I'm going to do, now I'm worried, I've no idea how much damage a up close blunderbuss would do. I don't think you have to actually be close to benefit from the shotgun effect at all. So you can see here the stats of the blunderbuss. You get 6 different projectiles. Let's try it out anyway. So I think that is set to it. So let's just attack.
So much for you!
Right, so blunderbuss fired. You can see there, I was on 15 focus before. That's just giving me 27 if my math's correct. That's a lot of focus. I can cast anything here now, pretty much. So it did 1 graze, 2 hits, and 3 crits. So I can now use a lot more of these.
Yes.
Let's switch over to the pistol. That would be my standard weapon with the Cipher. Let's use another one of those. Paralyze the guy again. Pretty slow for some reason. Paralyzed. And let's start firing off with a pistol. So we have 25 focus. How much will this do? That does a lot still. 13 focus that hit gave me. So the more damage you do, and if you do crits, then you get even more focus from these weapons. And I think this is the best weapon combination. Blunderbuss and pistols is the way to go, ruffian. Or if it's not the best, it's probably pretty near to. Okay, so I don't know how much focus then, but we got a lot. What else can I use? Mind Blades is good against multiple enemies. There's that, which is good at bosses. Blinded, that would help my rogue out if I was attacking it. Soul Shock's really good, so use that on your friendly opponent, and it does damage off him onto. There we go. So it did 32 shock damage. Pretty good spell. Right, I think that's enough of a combat example anyway. I probably could have showed a lot more off in this combat example, but this video would end up being too long if I did. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video and you fancy helping me out, please give this video a like. That really helps my channel a lot by attracting new people, getting up in the search ranking. So I'm really grateful to those of you who do that. Also, if you're new to the channel, or even old to the channel, you may want to consider subscribing. There's tons more Pillars of Eternity content on the channel, Let's Plays and other character creation videos. You can check out the character creation playlist in the comments section. If you have any feedback or questions you'd like to ask as well, please do. I'm planning on making many more of these character creation videos based on request basically, so if you want to see a certain class, please let me know. Right, I think that covers just about everything. Those of you who are really into my videos may want to check out my Patreon page as well. There's a link to that in the comments section as well. That's a way you can help out the channel and also have more of a say over the content I put on the channel as well in the future. Right, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.